Folks, welcome to the blood chapter. So the cardiovascular system is broken into 3 chapters. The first chapter is going to be the blood. Next one we're going to cover is the heart, and then the third one is going to be blood vessels. So we're going to go ahead and talk about all these for blood, and then we're going to have lots of slides for blood. And then in addition, we're also going to go ahead and maybe work on something in the lab for blood. Okay, so let's do this. So blood, there is a liquid part, and then there's going to be a solid part for the blood. This is a specialized type of connective tissue that consists of specialized cells and cell fragments, and there's a watery solution of ions and molecules. So there's liquid part, and there's type of there's 2 types of fluids, if you remember. So it's type of a connective tissue, and we have 2 types of fluid. There is a blood, this is one of them, and then there's lymph fluid. Lymph fluid is the second type. That's the solid stuff that's going to be made up of the cells, and then you also have your red blood cells and white blood cells, and then you got the liquid part that's going to be called the plasma. This is a straw color liquid that's called plasma. So plasma is mostly going to be made up of like water and then the dissolved chemicals. So whatever chemicals dissolve, they're very tiny, and that's what gives it its color. And usually it's considered to be the straw color if you take away all of the cells. So now the primary function of the blood again is this part of your circulatory system is to transport things. So transportation of nutrients, waste, hormones. So basically it's moving things from one part of your body to the other part of the body. For example, when you eat your breakfast, the blood goes down to your intestines, picks up the nutrients, then it takes it to the other parts of the body. That's the reason why you feel a little bit groggy after you have food coma, you feel not too alert after you eat because the blood from your brain is now in your intestines and they're trying to pick up nutrients. Then if you have waste products, then they're gonna send it over to your liver, your kidneys, and obviously move your hormones around your body as well. Blood also helps to regulate certain things, so like temperature. And temperature is something that also transfer. For example, if you get too hot, you're exercising, then what's going to happen is that the blood is going to go to the surface of your skin and you're going to look flush and you're going to look red. The reason is because it's the heat in your core and it's taking that heat to your skin through the blood and trying to get rid of it. So it also helps you regulate temperature, and it also helps you regulate the water volume. So you have hormones that help you retain water, and the water stays in your blood to help maintain the pH and things of that sort. So if you got chemicals in your plasma that help you buffer the pH, it'll keep the pH from going too high or going too low, and that's one of the features in your blood. Next one is the defense against infections and bleeding. So you have these white blood cells. The white blood cells are going to be part of your defense and your immune system. The white blood cells also, you also have something called platelets. So this is white blood cell, and you also have something called platelets. They'll go ahead and clot and create a scab if you have an infection from maybe bacterial virus. Then some of the white blood cells will go ahead and take care of them. So they have lots of functions to the blood. Now, if you're to look at the components of the blood, we have here is a test tube, and there's this little device that's called centrifuge. This is what it looks like. And if you were to get a mixture of blood and put it in the centrifuge, and that's what we use in the science lab. We don't really put very big test tubes in there, but you can put a test tube in there and it's gonna spin it really, really fast. And the spin cycle is like your washing machine, and it's going to spin it very fast, and it's gonna move the very heavy stuff to the bottom, and the light stuff is gonna stay on top. And usually the red blood cells and the white blood cells ends up being a tiny little pellet down here. And this diagram here is basically illustrating to you that if you go ahead and pull the solids down, this is what you're gonna have. So this kind of straw color liquid that's on top is what we call plasma, and that's going to make up about 55% of the whole blood. And what's going to be comprised of plasma is mostly water. electrolytes, which are going to be all those salts that you need, like potassium, sodium, calcium, and any type of proteins like albumins, globulins, and clotting proteins that are normally in blood, and whatever hormones are in your system, and then gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, and then any type of nutrients and waste products. Um, so it's really important for us to study blood because one of the best diagnostics for a person's health, you can go ahead and get a blood sample, and depending on the kind of test you're doing, you can test for all these things. You can go ahead and see what your electrolyte levels are. If you're fainting maybe a lot, you can see how hydrated you are. If you're super dehydrated, obviously the plasma percentage is going to be maybe less than 55%. And if you have any hormones in your blood, for example, the pregnancy test, when you're really early in the pregnancy and when you pee on a stick, it's going to be test negative. That's because the hormone levels are not high enough to trigger those chemicals reaction. So, but then they have much sensitive tests. For example, blood tests they can do for pregnancy to see the HCG levels, and they can do a blood sample and they can test for it, and they'll tell you, if you're pregnant, if you're not, or if you have a placenta coming off of uterus. So that's usually the indication of pregnancy, all these hormones that are going to be present in the blood. And then when you're going to the hospital, when they do your routine checkup, they might put this finger on your, they might put this thing on your finger, where they're testing for gases. And then they're trying to figure out what your gas levels are. They look at your oxygen levels, and if it's too low, they'll either need you to be on a ventilator or some type of other intervention might be needed. We said you have two components. You have your plasma, which was 55% here, and then you have your blood, which is 45%. So, which is made up of these formed elements that are RBCs, red blood cells, WBCs, white blood cells, and then you have these other things called platelets. Okay, so we're going to go through this in a little bit more detail. We're also going to spend a lot of time looking at them under the microscope. So you're going to be required to identify red blood cells and white blood cells and so forth. So it's a little bit more complicated than just white blood cells. So I'm now actually going to test you on, you know, different shapes of the blood cells, but not these percentages. You don't have to know these percentages here for the plasma proteins and other solids. So your textbook does give you a chart for it. So the normal levels are basically 6% is albumin, and 60% or 6% is albumin. Plasma proteins are 7% here, and then other solids 1%, then water is 92%. So here you have 60% albumins, 35% globulins, 4% fibrinogens, and then regulatory proteins is 1%. So when you do a blood test and they give you a report back, they kind of give you summary of your blood test. Anything outside of the range, they're going to flag it, and you're going to see the results chart, and the doctor will look at it and see if there needs to be any intervention. So you get mostly, you got mostly water, which is 92%, and then you have some proteins and electrolytes. So these are the electrolytes I was talking about. So you do need to know what K stands for and what Ca stands for, what Na stands for. Na stands for sodium, so natrium. I don't know if you heard about that before. K stands for potassium, so kalemia. These are terms in Greek and Latin. So that's where they come from. K comes from kalemia, and A stands for natrium. So those are going to be the formed elements. So now we're going to go into more detail, and we also have platelets in the blood, which are not cells. So these platelets is just 0.1%. These are not cells. These are fragments, cell fragments, and they're not considered cells, We have red blood cells, which are comprised most of our blood. It's 99.9%. Then we have 0.1%, which are going to comprise your white blood cells. And that makes sense because the white blood cells, their function is for immunity. So if you have an infection, the white blood cells are there to take care of it, and they might go a little bit higher in number when you have an infection. But if you're not always going to be sick, it doesn't make sense for your body to make lots of white blood cells. So the percentage is pretty low, which is 0.1%. So you only need a few of them kind of laying around waiting for you to get sick. And when you do get sick, they increase in number in order to take care of the infection versus, you're always breathing. So your red blood cells, they're going to your lungs, they're picking up oxygen. You need to have lots of red blood cells. And then the coloration of red blood cells you see in blood, we're going to talk about that as well. So these are your white blood cells. Neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes, which are the biggest one here. These are red blood cells, and these are the platelets, which are not cells, but cell fragments. So let's talk about the first type, which is the red blood cells here. The common name is erythrocyte. Erythrocyte, cyte means cell, erythro means red. Erythro stands for red, that's the prefix. So erythrocyte stands for red blood cells, red cells. It literally translates into red cells. However, when you make a wet mount, maybe you did it for general biology, and the microscope lab, so you might make a wet mount there. You take a drop of blood, you do a smear, and then you spread it really thin, and you have one cell layer, and you'll see that erythrocytes, they actually don't have any color. That's what they look like. But the slides that we look at in the lab, they have colors. That's because they've been stained. So I just want to make sure everybody understand that if you take unstained blood, you're not going to be able to see much. It's going to be hard to distinguish what's what. That's the reason we have the slides stained with a dye. It lets and let it pick up pigments before you can actually identify, and makes it easier to identify lots of things that are in the blood. So erythrocytes' main function is to basically transport gases, and the two gases that are there are carbon dioxide and oxygen. So those are the ones you're breathing right now. The oxygen is going into your lungs, being absorbed into your blood, because the erythrocytes they've got this chemical called hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin is what binds to oxygen. And you also have carbon dioxide. So your muscles are breaking down ATP and breaking down glucose and doing work. So CO2 is being produced and released as a waste products. That also binds to erythrocytes. When they go out to the lungs, they release CO2, and that's what you breathe out. When you breathe in oxygen, that's going to get bound to the chemicals inside the erythrocytes. And this is what it looks like when you stain it. And erythrocytes here are stained purple, and that's due to the dye. And in the middle, you can see there's an empty spot. And we're going to talk about that as well in a second. So let me show you the shape of the cell. It's a disc shape. It has large area for diffusion, large surface area. There's no mitochondria, there's no nucleus. So the extra surface area gives it has the extra surface area, so it could absorb gases much easier. And that's what's interesting, is that it has no nucleus. This erythrocyte has no nucleus, no mitochondria, because all it's doing is transporting gases. And because it has no nucleus, no mitochondria, they cannot go through mitosis. And once these red blood cells, called erythrocytes, are at the end of its life cycle, it basically dies. It can't make another copy of itself. So the way so it comes from your bone marrow. We're going to talk about that as well. You have to have healthy bone marrow in order to have healthy blood, because there's no nucleus in erythrocytes. So the bone marrow then will make new copies, and there's going to be differences between male and female. Males tend to be about 20% on average larger than females. So there's going to be more erythrocytes in males compared to females. The number is going to be 5.4 million cells in males. So if you take 1 liter of blood and you divide it by 1 billion, that's going to give you 1 microliter, and then that's about 5.4 million cells per microliter in males. In females, about 4.8 million per microliter. So females, this is the reason if a woman goes to and tries to donate some blood, she might get rejected, and they might say, sorry, you're a little bit anemic, which means that the red blood cells counts are too low. And if they donate blood, that means they're going to be not enough erythrocytes left in their body to keep the oxygen level at homeostasis in the body. So the person might get really tired and faint. That's why it's not safe for a person to donate blood if their red blood cell count is already low. So the color comes from hemoglobin. This is what I said earlier. It contains hemoglobin and with iron. So that's where the color is coming from, the iron actually. So hemoglobin is what's carrying the oxygen. So iron is going to be the bind to the molecule called hemoglobin inside the erythrocyte. And you got thousands and thousands of these little molecules called hemoglobin. So we're gonna look at that in a second. First, I want to talk about this shape. So we said the erythrocyte is disc shaped. So this is a disc. Technically, we call this a biconcave disc. So let me write that. Biconcave disc. And the reason it's called biconcave, the word bi means two. If you, let's say, if you say you concave your head, that means you hit your head and you made a little dent on your head. So what concave means is a little dent, and bi means two. And you can see here that this part here is concave, and then this part here is also concave. So biconcave, that's where the comes from. Just two parts of it. Concave means the center of it's going to be really thin, and the function of this is to increase the surface area. Once you increase the surface area, the oxygen and CO2 can get in there much easier, and that's the function of this biconcave structure. So also the reason why when you look at it under the microscope, I said the center kind of looks like empty. So it's like a donut, but that's not what's happening. The edges over here are much thicker compared to the center. And that's the reason it's not going to have much color in the center. It might look white, and it's going to be very light in color because it's biconcave. So the other thing that's very interesting is there's no nucleus. That's the other reason why you don't see anything in the center, because there's no nucleus. So what's really weird is that this is unique to vertebrates. But if you look at the blood, maybe fish blood. This is fish blood. Under the microscope, that's going to have a nucleus. So fish erythrocytes, they actually do have a nucleus. Amphibians, they also have a nuclei, but for some reason, vertebrates don't. And I don't know the evolutionary reason for it. And maybe vertebrates don't need a nucleus. There's no need for nucleus. And that's because the whole function here is to basically move oxygen and carbon dioxide around. It's not really there to divide and generate energy or anything like that. Okay. So we were talking about hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is basically the iron is going to bind to hemoglobin inside the erythrocyte. So you've got thousands and thousands of these little molecules called hemoglobin. I think I said this before. And globin refers to the part protein. So globin means protein. And then heme refers to blood. So this means the heme prefix means blood. So hemocyte or hemolytic, anything like that stands for blood. And then hemoglobin is going to be the protein that's going to be associated with your blood. So hemoglobin is going to be found in 4 parts. If you recall from general biology, this is a quaternary structure of the protein. So it has 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's quaternary structure. And heme refers to the molecule, and then heme is the molecule that has iron in it. So that's what makes the blood red. If you go ahead and you replace the hemoglobin, instead of having iron in it, you replace it with copper, that's going to change the color of the blood. So let's see. So in case of invertebrates, they don't really have iron in their blood, they have copper. So if you put copper in the horseshoe crab blood, let's see. So if you put copper in the blood, it's going to, instead of iron, it's going to change color. So that's gonna make it blue. So that's why horseshoe crab blood is blue. So let's see, rusty iron. And when steel rusts, it kind of turns reddish. So when it gets rusty, when steel gets rusty, means the iron is going to react with the oxygen in the atmosphere, and it's going to make the red rust. The red color is coming from iron. That's what makes your blood red. And on the other hand, if you have brass, which has copper in it, and when brass tarnishes, let's see. When the brass tarnishes, it kind of turns bluish green here. So that's what you might see. So this is kind of showing you there too. So when the brass tarnishes, is equivalent to basically iron rusting. So that's going to be greenish blue in color. This has to do with the copper. That's the reason why horseshoe crab and lobsters and things like that, they have blue blood, versus we have the red blood. It's due to the fact that we have iron and they have copper instead. All right. So O2 attaches to the heme group, and therefore O2 molecules that attach to each hemoglobin molecule. All right, so where does it come from? The origin of erythrocyte is in the bone marrow. Bone marrow has the stem cells that are blood-forming cells, and we call the adult stem cells. So we have in humans, the lifespan of red blood cell is 120 days. So these stem cells, when they get hit with the hormone is going to cause to generate erythrocytes. The name of the hormone is called erythropoietin. I have another slide for that, so in case you're trying to write that down. So we said erythro stands for red. Erythropoietin is going to make the red blood cells, red cells. This is a hormone that's made by your kidneys. It's going to go to the stem cells, and that's going to tell them stem cells to crank out more erythrocytes. So these erythrocytes don't live forever. They do have their lifespan, which is 120 days. And at the end of their lifespan, they break down. Once they break down, erythropoietin will go ahead and activate and then tell your bone marrow to make more red cells. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And that's how generally it works. If you go and you actually donate blood, you give yourself, you give some of your blood away, then your kidneys will release the erythropoietin. It's a signals to reach the body homeostasis. It's gonna start cranking out some of this hormone called erythropoietin, which tells your bone marrow to make more blood to reach the homeostasis. So control production is erythropoietin, that's the hormone. So how do you measure the amount of red blood cells? So we come back to this device called a centrifuge. I showed you this earlier. So what you do is you take this glass pipe, very thin glass pipe. And if you took chemistry in high school, you might recognize it. You prick your finger. So if you prick your finger, you get a drop of blood in this hollow pipe. You touch the tip of it and to the blood, and then that'll draw the blood in all the way up, and it's going to draw the blood all the way up like this. And then it'll stop at one point here, and then you take some wax or parafoam or something like that, and then you just cap it, and it doesn't come out, and this whole thing goes into a centrifuge. Centrifuge spins it really, really fast, and then you spin it really fast. The heavy stuff is going to go on the bottom. In this case, the red is heavy stuff, and then the plasma is going to be on the top. So then you look at it and you try to figure out the percentage of it, and you know what percent is going to be erythrocyte, what percent is going to be plasma. That's how you measure red blood cells. So having your so that's called the percentage of whole blood cell that consists of red blood cells is called hematocrit. So once you have this done, this is called hematocrit. If you look at your blood report, you go to your doctor, they do a blood test, they might tell you what your hematocrit count is. If your hematocrit count is within the normal range, then they'll say no intervention is needed. If it's outside the normal range, they might say you're anemic, or you have too much blood, or your blood might be too thin, your blood might be too thick. You know, any of that can be happening. So if your blood is too thick, that puts you in a danger of having blood clots and stroke, and things of that sort. So then you take this little glass vial, and you put it in a device. You have this little metal thing. This metal thing is basically take the glass vial, you put it on there, and um, you this should be at 100. And when the technician takes the blood, they should really take it up to the line, and then they spin it down. The red blood cells, erythrocytes, are going to stop at one point, and this device is going to be broken down into percentages. So wherever the line is, they might say you have a hematocrit of about 49% here. Or if your line is over here, they might say your hematocrit is at maybe 42% here, and so forth. So that's how we are able to determine what your hematocrit count is. And now this is old school. Most places don't do this anymore unless you work in a clinic where it's, you know, really old school doctor. Modern centrifuge automatically spit out this number. So when you go ahead and put this in a machine, once it's done spinning, with a laser or something like that, it's gonna measure it, it's gonna spit out a number, you're gonna have a digital readout, and then you don't have to deal with this anymore. But if you happen to be in a place where they have this device for emergencies, maybe the digital device is not working properly, then you have to do this old school, and you might have a little plastic or metal device where you put this in there and you have to manually read it. And then if your hematocrit is again out of range, then your hematocrit is too low or too high, either you're anemic or you have too much and your blood is too thick, then that can cause problems. So low hematocrit or hemoglobin may indicate anemia. That's what the next slide is. So what are some signs of anemia? So if you're going to be anemic, that means you don't have as much red blood cells as you need to have. So you're going to be very dizzy. You might faint because you're not getting enough oxygen into your body. And so fainting, so the ones in red is severe anemia, chest pain, heart attack, angina. So those are the things that can happen. You're going to have low blood pressure because your blood volume is too low. Your heart is not going to be functioning 100%. You're going to be short of breath because you're not getting enough oxygen. So your body is trying to get you to breathe more. So your skin is going to be pale, and you have less erythrocytes. It's going to look kind of, you know, your eye is going to be yellowish or pale, and you have all these different types of symptoms. I'm not saying that if you have all these, then you have anemia. I'm just saying that people with anemia might show these symptoms. So please don't self-diagnose yourself or online diagnose yourself. We have all gone to the doctor, and then they would say, you know, we don't know until the test comes back. So if you don't have any of these issues, or if you have any of these issues, you need to go to the doctor and get a blood test, and then you have to wait and get the results before you're diagnosed with something. So please don't diagnose yourself, and go to the doctor if you're having any of these symptoms. And they have their special equipment and everything, but this can happen differently. Basically, people who are older, they're going to be more prone to, in some cases, That's going to be tied to also the race. So different races, they're going to have different amounts of hematocrit. That's at a normal level due to the genetics. So as I mentioned before, the thing that controls the amount of erythrocytes is this hormone called erythropoietin. This hormone stimulates the increased red blood cell production by stem cells in the bone marrow, and your kidneys are the ones that are releasing this hormone. So they're going to help you with the homeostasis. If you're anemic, your hematocrit levels are low due to the reasons that you just donate blood or something like that, then your kidneys are going to signal, and and they will produce erythropoietin hormone, and that will signal the bone marrow to make more blood cells. And then your blood cell levels go back to normal. So that's how it works. An example of this, it would be if you were to go on a location that's high altitude. So right now you're at the sea level. So if you head over to Denver, or Tibet, or Peru, or in the Andes, the oxygen level is going to be too low. If you're going to be living in a place where the oxygen was much lower, you're going to be short of breath. You're going to have a hard time breathing. And what does it cause your kidneys to do? It's going to cause the kidneys to release erythropoietin, and it's going to go ahead and make more erythrocytes, and that'll make it much easier for you to breathe. And what people used to do for Olympics, they in the Olympics, if Olympics gonna be at sea level, they will maybe when it was in Los Angeles, then they'll go ahead and transport themselves to travel very high altitude location like Denver. And then they're gonna train in high altitude. This will cause them to generate a lot of red blood cells. Hematocrit goes up, and that gives them more oxygen. Then right before the race, they head back to the sea level. Then they have advantage over the opponents because they are able to bind much more oxygen in their blood um, compared to the other people. The other way to do it is to inject yourself with EPO, or EPO stands for erythropoietin, and I think that's called doping, which reminds me of Lance Armstrong. So he was stripped of all his achievements because he was a bicyclist, and he was all his medals got stripped because they said he was doping with EPO. But a lot of people, don't realize that everybody, was kind of doping. So either you can go train at a high altitude, or you could take EPO. And again, EPO stands for erythropoietin. It's artificial erythropoietin that can cause your body to make more red blood cells, and that'll increase your hematocrit. So you'll have an advantage over the opponents. So that happened to Lance Armstrong. So you can read more about it if you want to. So anyway, if you inject yourself with too much EPO, that'll make problems as well. That's gonna make the hematocrit too high. And if it's too high, it's gonna make the blood too thick. And then that'll cause things like blood clots, strokes. Um, so very high hematocrit is risky because of increased blood viscosity. Viscosity here refers to how thick the blood is. Viscosity, if the viscosity is very thick, that would be like milkshake. And if its viscosity is thin, that would be like water, very thin. That's water, very thick. That's like milkshake. So if you want your blood to be, if your blood is like milkshake, that's not good either. That's gonna make your heart beat very fast, and that's gonna make your blood pressure go up. So basically, your overall health is going to be bad if you have your hematocrit too high. So I'm gonna stop this video here, and then for the white blood cells, I'll record another video. Thank you for listening.